the strategies that he's using to grow, retain, and acquire new business in real estate, and some of the technology solutions that they use over at the Oakville Group. We have a few people who are just signing on to the webinar right now. I want to let you know that today's webinar is going to be interactive. You can use the GoToMeeting control panel to ask questions of participants who are, of the presenters today. Just hit the questions button and put in your question, and we'll get to it at the end of today's webinar. Also, if you're having any trouble with the audio or visualizing any of the slides that we're going to be displaying here today, by all means put a note in the chat box, and our technology staff will get to that. Today's webinar is going to be recorded, so if you have an interest in sharing the webinar with some others, or you need to leave the webinar to go to a meeting or something, don't worry about it. We'll send you the recorded version of the webinar after the webinar today. So with that, Leilani, can you go? Can you turn on the presentation, please? So we'll just give it a minute, and the presentation will appear on your screen. There we go. Okay, so just again, to introduce today's webinar, the topic is, this is for brokers, and we're talking about how to grow, retain, and acquire new business in real estate. I'm Victor Lund. I'm the co-founder of RETechnology. I'm also a partner with the Wave Group, and I also own Wave Group Communications. Technology in real estate is my thing, and working with brokers is something that I enjoy doing more than anything else, and technology is a specialty offering that we do with brokers in real estate. And I have joining me here today Aaron Wheeler from the San Francisco Bay Area. He's the president and managing broker of the Oakville Group. Aaron, are you with us?
I am with you, Victor, and thank you for having me today.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it. Just to kind of get started here before I introduce Matt, can you just tell us a little bit about the Oakville Group and like the size of your organization, the different business units? I know that you have an integrated mortgage company. You have offices not only in the Bay Area but also in New York. Can you just share a little bit of that story about your company?
Absolutely, Victor. My name is Aaron Wheeler. I am the president and managing director of the Oakville Group here in beautiful San Francisco. At Victor, we are a boutique luxury real estate firm. We also have a mortgage company as well that Victor had mentioned. We are heavy utilizers and early adopters of technology. We've been using DocuSign pretty much since the very beginning and have had the benefit of incorporating that into our business to be able to increase our service and customer experience as a whole.
Oh, sorry. Oh, that's excellent. And Matt Coleman with DocuSign. Are you with us, Matt?
I am here, Victor. Thank you for having me as well.
Yeah, so DocuSign is one of the providers of technology resources that Aaron uses significantly throughout his organization, both in the mortgage company and in the real estate company. And Matt from DocuSign is one of the people that work with real estate brokers to identify how they can integrate DocuSign into their business to produce the outcomes that they're looking for, to make transactions much more efficient, and to be able to provide signature solutions that not only provide conveniences to the consumer, but also provide assurances to the banks who are receiving those documents that we have a legitimate document. So thank you for joining us. Matt, can you just tell how long have you been with DocuSign?
Yeah, pleasure to be here. I've been with DocuSign about 2.5 years.
Okay, excellent. And so let's just go to the next slide, Leilani, if you wouldn't mind. So to kick off the conversation a little bit, I kind of want to talk to Aaron a little bit about one of the challenges that brokers have in real estate today is agents adopting new technology tools. And you know, specifically when a broker enters into an agreement with a company like DocuSign or any other company, if you don't have agents using the solution, you're paying for it, and you feel kind of like you're losing out on something. Can you talk a little bit about how you've used DocuSign and transaction rooms in your business and how you've been able to promote agent adoption?
Absolutely, Victor. We use both products, DocuSign and DocuSign Transaction Rooms, as a daily part of our business. It's true. There is a mentality out there that if something is not broken, then you don't fix it. So when people are used to using tried and true methods of pen and paper and faxing documents, that's a very easy solution. But my approach is that complacency is devastating. So we like to take a progressive approach to be able to drive adoption of new technologies that will increase our productivity and provide a exceptional client experience, because that's really what it's all about. We want to amaze and delight our clients. And DocuSign enables us to do that. In order to keep consistency, we've made it mandatory across all of our agents to utilize the technology, and they find that it's a significant time saver, and it's also a moneymaker, because here in the San Francisco Bay Area, we have a very competitive market. Oftentimes there are multiple offers per transaction, and he or she that is able to respond the fastest could make or break the difference between whether your offer is accepted or not. And in those situations, DocuSign is absolutely invaluable.
So is it forced family fun to the agents? I mean, do they, I know Northern California is a little strange because agents get paid out of escrow, right?
So yes.
So I know in a lot of markets around the United States where the broker is controlling the paycheck to the agent, they just have a business rule that says until you supply an electronic transaction, you don't get paid. That's pretty hard for you to do.
Not necessarily, Victor, because at the end of the day, even though our agents are paid out of escrow, as a broker, I still do have to sign a commission disbursement authorizing escrow to disperse the commission to them in compliance with our laws here in California. So there is a system of checks and balances in place to ensure that the agent's files are correct and complete in DocuSign transaction rooms, and we're able to ensure that everything is in order.
So how does that workflow work with the title company when they're doing the closing? How do they send you a DocuSign for the disbursement and you sign it from wherever you're at?
They send over what we call a commission disbursement or a broker demand here in California. This is also true in several other states, such as Texas, for example. I fill that out in DocuSign, electronically sign it, and send it back to escrow, and they know to disperse the commission at that point.
So how does it work in New York? Because I know that that's a state where lawyers are still involved in the closings. Can you talk a little bit about how DocuSign goes into your workflow in those markets?
The lawyers pretty much handle the entire process there. So DocuSign is less integral of a component, because once you are able to reach an agreement and have a deal sheet between all of the parties, then it's turned over to the attorneys, and they run the process at that point.
So, Matt, I wanted to ask you a little question about that. I think it was within the last 2 years that New York State finally recognized the ability to use digital signatures in a transaction. Can you give me a primer on where they're at with that?
I actually heard fairly recently that they did make some good headway in getting it legalized in the state. And a big part of that was due to the fact of a couple things that DocuSign's doing behind the scenes with respect to legality and security. And that was, it should be top of mind for a lot of folks, but New York State was very key into that, and so they're focusing their research into exploring what we're doing on the back end to make sure all their transactions are going to be safe and secure.
So we could just move on to the next slide. I just want to ask Aaron a few questions about what are some of the other tools that you're providing to your agents today, and how is it that you feel about providing those tools when a lot of times they're not being used?
Sure. Just to give you an example, we utilize Boomtown for lead generation to create a lead capture tool for prospective clients. And every day on the system, I'm able to log in and look at something called a opportunity wall, which basically shows all of the active leads that are in the system and what our agents are doing or not doing necessarily with those potential clients. So we want to make sure that if we're going to be offering leads out, that they're going to be worked on an active basis, or we will reassign those to make sure that the client is receiving the attention that they deserve.
And do you find that, do you find that when you roll out DocuSign and you're doing transaction rooms, that those products and services are being more clearly adopted by your agents because they're providing greater value than some of the other marketing programs that you guys are providing, or do you think it's fairly the same across the board?
I think that anything that directly impacts their individual business and their bottom line from a profitability perspective definitely receives the lion's share of attention. And when you look at DocuSign as being integral for the ability to complete and close a transaction, then the adoption curve is significantly higher.
Do you find that in that regard these types of tools are helping you recruit and retain agents, or do you think that you're forcing them to use it as something that becomes a little bit of a abrasive relationship between the agent and the broker?
I think it's a matter of each individual broker's preference as to how they choose their business. I've always adopted a very technology-centric approach, and I tend to associate with our organization a more technology-savvy agent. So there's different strokes for different folks. If that appeals to someone and they see the value add in their business, then they'll definitely see the benefit of the technologies that we're using, whereas others may prefer a more, shall we say, old-school approach.
I kind of want to pick on the story a little bit that we heard before this webinar, that you're doing sales for the Waldorf Astoria in Manhattan.
That's a residential leasing program, and we use very little technology with regard to that. It's very old-fashioned.
So you're not. I mean, I guess when I look at somebody that's leasing a property for $19,000 a month or whatever, I kind of imagine you sending the lease agreement via DocuSign to them on their jet, and they're touching the button saying, "Yeah, we're good." But that's not really the case.
It can be as simple as that, but not always.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Well, let's do a quick poll here. I just want to find out from the folks that have joined us today what some of their interests are with DocuSign. So if I could just invite you to select things that you believe are most important about integrating digital signatures into your business. And I'd also like you to indicate that if you have some additional questions or things that you'd hope to gain out of the webinar, we're obviously going to get into some more material here in a moment, but if there's specific questions that you have, by all means, go to the GoToWebinar control panel, expand the questions button, and type in your question, and we'll be sure to have one of the panelists answer that for you. So we'll let that run for just a minute more, and then we'll jump on to the next slide. Okay, I think we're pretty good with that. Excellent. So just moving along. Wow, look at that. So I'm kind of curious about the 8% of people who said that none of the above. Like it's very interesting to understand why it is that people use DocuSign. When I was at DocuSign yesterday, I had what I felt like would be a really great idea, which is, encourage DocuSign users to give DocuSign as a gift for Christmas, because I know that, I don't sell real estate. I run technology companies. I run a consulting firm, but I use DocuSign every day, and one of the best joys that I have with that is the ability to just open an agreement within my cell phone in DocuSign, sign it, and send it right there. And that mobility feature is really different with DocuSign than it is with any other of the products that are out there in the marketplace today that don't have an app. With the iPhone devices, if you can usually use pretty much any of these tools by logging onto their web service and do that. But if you think about the workflow of taking a document from your email and saving it somewhere on your iPad or your iPhone, you really can't do that. So that means you can't really upload it into the solution that you're looking to deploy with. So it becomes pretty tricky to use on a mobile device if you're using some of the other products. But I'm really astounded by the amount of money that brokers actually save when they go paperless in their business today. Aaron, have you seen just a dramatic drop in the amount of costs that you have for document storage and for paper in your company?
Paper, what's paper? What's document storage? We really don't have that. We just store our hard drives up with documents, but we take advantage of DocuSign transaction rooms to hold all of our documents in DocuSign as well. So that's really efficient from that perspective, but really it's about the time value of money to be able to move things back and forth between everyone that needs to look at it, including myself, our transaction coordinators, our agents, our clients, and just really all of the participants is huge. But we talk about saving money. I like to look at it's really all about making money. And DocuSign helps us make money because when we're competing in a transaction, we may not have a lot of time to make a decision because there are 5, 6, 7 other people that are interested in that property as well. So if we can get our clients to sign the paperwork to move faster than someone else and get the deal closed, that increases our bottom line, period, done. There's no better ROI or way to describe it than that. It makes things happen.
Yeah, so Leilani, can you just advance the slide? I just want to, I think that, depending on where you are in the brokerage, the thing I love about you, Aaron, is you just give the raw answer from the broker perspective. And I know a number of companies on the phone are operating enterprise companies with, well, there's a couple here that have over 3,000 agents in their company, and they're spanning multiple states and multiple MLSs, multiple associations. They're living in a really complex environment, and they're trying to understand how it is that they can identify a product or service that's going to work everywhere, that's going to maintain the assurances that the documents are going to be accepted by the lenders. But the really curious thing about this is the amount of money per transaction that's being saved. I mean, when I think about $10 per transaction, maybe that's not terribly important in more of a luxury, low-volume business in California, but if you're selling homes in a lot of these city centers where where really transaction volume is the way that you profit as a brokerage, anything that you can do to cut costs out of the transaction is really significant. And you get all these other benefits, so it's pretty intriguing. I wonder if we couldn't get Aaron. I don't think a lot of people have been able to see transaction rooms that you're using. So, Aaron, would it be possible for you to show the audience here, do a quick demo on what it is that we're talking about and how it's being used? And then, I'm sorry, Matt, if you could do that, and then Aaron, if you could provide some color as Matt goes through the demo, and just talk about some of the nuances to the application and how you think it's making an improvement in the business, that would be great.
Absolutely.
We'll switch the control over to Matt. It'll just take a second.
Sure.
Show your screen.
Absolutely. Can you see my Gmail account here?
I'm seeing your Gmail account.
Okay. I'm going to show real quickly, Victor, for those that have never seen DocuSign before, what their clients can experience, and then I'll circle back to the transaction rooms if that's all right.
That's perfect.
Awesome. So I sent a document to a fake Gmail account that I created, and when I click on the link as someone who's a client, this is what I see. It's a simple email, and it is very clear what I need to do. I've sent a document to review and sign. When I click the yellow box, a new tab opens up inside of DocuSign. This is a secure area where the document is being housed within the DocuSign application. So the very first step that I take is agreeing to the electronic records and disclosure here. So
can you just talk about why that's so important?
Absolutely. So back in 2000, the Federal e-Sign Act was put through by the Clinton administration that basically said if you adhere to certain rules and regulations, a digital or electronic signature is as legally binding as a wet signature. And there's a lot of things that DocuSign does on the back end of every transaction where we're capturing a lot of data that helps us, first of all, pinpoint exactly who that person is and who they say they are, but then also helps us to track when and where they're signing from. So we're actually capturing IP addresses. And this is a part of what you're agreeing to, is that you agree to have that information released so that we can track and ensure that this document is being processed in the right way.
So in many ways, an electronic, the electronic record and signature that's being captured in DocuSign is probably a more authentic validation of a person signing a document than a wet signature.
It's a very interesting topic that you bring up, and certainly we would make that argument. But picture this. If I had a document, say this radon disclosure, in front of a judge that was wet signed, they can see the signature, and then I have a DocuSign that was electronically signed, same document, and you're judging the validity of that signature, the only really option you have is to look at that wet signature and say, well, it looks like them, or perhaps bring in a handwriting expert, versus DocuSign, where you were capturing the IP address of where they signed, which is also pinpointing their geolocation of where they signed. And then there's a couple other things that we can do to actually identify who they are. And so when judges look at these, it's pretty clear-cut which one is the most secure and the safest way to go. And that's what a lot of people are starting to understand when using DocuSign more and more.
So I know that like DocuSign is well beyond the real estate industry. What are some of the other industries that are using DocuSign?
Really, the answer to that question is simple. It's every industry. And I'm not being tongue-in-cheek by that by any means. When you look at it, everyone from the IRS down to large brokerages like Charles Schwab and Merrill Lynch, banks like Bank of America, a lot of different folks from across all industries use DocuSign for a lot of the reasons that we've discussed, a lot of the back-end items that we're doing to ensure security, enhance legality, and provide a clean and easy signing experience.
So, Aaron, from your perspective as a broker, I know that a lot of consumers are still having their first experiences with electronic signatures. Do you find that the DocuSign brand being on the tool is something that augments the respect that your customers have for the solution, or do you think they don't care?
Oh, absolutely, Victor. I think that anytime someone is dealing with something new, the name brand recognition helps increase their comfort level. So I find that people recognize the DocuSign brand much as like people would say that I'm going to FedEx something or I'm going to Xerox something. Now people are accustomed to I'm going to DocuSign something.
Okay. Excellent. Well, sorry to interrupt, Matt. Just carry on.
No, that was a great segue. Thank you, Aaron. So let's get on with DocuSigning something, in this case, the radon disclosure that I was talking about earlier. So when I agree to that electronic records disclosure, I'm presented with the document. And if I've never signed before, I might feel a little lost, but that's why DocuSign actually guides you through the process with this, these yellow tags. So when I start, DocuSign will actually direct me to right where I need to sign. And since I've never signed before, the first prompt that I'm asked to do is to adopt my signature. And this process is very quick and easy, and depending on what device you're using, in this instance I'm on my laptop, you can either select a style of what you would like your signature to look like. Keep in mind, neither is no more legally binding than the next. It's all about the back-end things that we're doing to ensure legality and security. So if it's your preference to choose one of these pre-formulated ones, you may do so. Otherwise, if you're on your smartphone device, it's going to default you to draw. And this is a little tricky to do on your, on a mouse, but you get the idea where if you wanted to, you could do your little your signature with your finger or with a stylus. But for simplicity's sake, I'm going to go ahead and select a style here and begin signing my document.
And once you've done that one time, your signature and your profile and all that information is retained by DocuSign for future signature events, right?
Correct, correct. So this instance here, this person's never ever used DocuSign, but as they work with their agent more and more, they will continue to maintain that signature they've adopted, so they don't need to go through that process again.
But literally, I mean, we talked about ease of use before, so literally you click sign, you pick your signature, it's a second click, you fill in text, you're done.
Right, and that's exactly what I was going to get to. Is it's very simple to adopt a signature. The other piece of the document that I've included here is just a data field to show you that we can capture different things if need be. So if you needed to capture some information from a client, you could do that in DocuSign as well. Now, you'll notice when I finished, this blue bar at the bottom popped up notifying that you indeed did finish your document, and in order to complete the signing ceremony, we click that Finish button, and that in turn sends that document back to the originator. The signer gets a copy of it in their email, and all parties are notified that that transaction has been complete.
Now, and the customer didn't need to, I mean, they don't need to buy DocuSign. They just, when you get it from your realtor, they can use it. They can't do their own documents, but they can complete any document that's sent to them, right? And it's all free.
Correct. Correct. And I think what you're really getting at there, Victor, is signing is always free. So the cost is, there's never any cost tied to signing documents. That's always free of charge.
Okay.
So that's the experience from a client of an agent and what they would go through in using DocuSign. Does it make sense for me to shift gears to the transaction portion and show how we got to this scenario?
Absolutely.
Great. So what I've done is I'm going to now put on my agent hat, and I'm going to go through DocuSign transaction rooms briefly and show you how agents interact with the tool. When you first log in as an agent, you're directed to this dashboard. I don't spend too much time here because this is an accumulation of work that an agent has put into the system up to date. So they're getting a sense of transactions they've worked on recently, things that need their attention, as in maybe documents were missing something or something was wrong with the document and they need to fix it. They're getting that view right here. And then as you scroll down, you get similar activity related to DocuSign envelopes, which are, as Aaron pointed out earlier, similar to a FedEx envelope, right? Except it's an electronic version of that. You could put a single document into an envelope. You could put a package of documents. So when you hear me reference envelope, that's what I'll be talking about moving forward.
I have one question about the items that need your attention.
Sure.
So with transactions, one of the things that I really love about DocuSign is that I can set a provision. When I create a document and send it to somebody in DocuSign, I can say remind this person every day, every 3 days, you know, and I can set parameters as to when to stop bugging them. But I just love the fact that it's just persistently reminding the person that they need to pay attention to this document and take care of that. Is that technology pass right on through here?
Absolutely. Yeah, it does. And it's funny you mentioned that. I heard someone reference it as an auto nag tool. And it's very true. It takes the burden off of the DocuSign user and places it on DocuSign to remind someone that they need to complete this document. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Now, favor of the auto nag.
The auto nag, right. As we navigate through the tool, I'm just going to go from left to right and showing some items. Please interject with any questions as I go through this. The inbox is one area where if you're a little bit more traditional and you're working with a client that perhaps prefers using a fax machine, we understand that and we get it. We're not trying to force technology down anyone's throat, but instead enable them to work how they want to work. So if you're ever working with a client that prefers you to fax them and receive faxes to and from, we actually assign unique fax lines to each person using the product. So this is both an inbound and outbound fax number that you can use with your more traditional clients. Now, the My Documents section, I think Aaron touched on this briefly again, is an area where you can store all of your documents, whether they're personal-related documents or whether they're business-related. There's a lot of different ways that you can store your documents, and storage is always included in our service. There's no additional charge. Again, taking that burden off of having you store your own documents in file cabinets, heaven forbid, or even a electronic filing system.
Can you just pause there for a second? Last year there was a whole bunch of issues related to the ability to use forms in different, association forms.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do you guys integrate this with zip forms?
We do. We do, absolutely. And I can actually show a piece of the integration here in a moment, but that's a big partnership that we're very excited about, which is essentially going to allow zip form users to work directly out of DocuSign transaction rooms and have their zip form library inside of the transaction room account. So there's no need to go to zip forms and then push a document to DocuSign. Zip forms is going to live natively inside of the application.
Awesome. And so there'll be, is there going to be a tab, or the folders will be here? Or how's that going to?
Yeah, I'd be happy to show you
about what it's going to look like.
Sure, absolutely. I started up a room, Victor, earlier this morning to show for demo purposes here, 101 Northwest 45th. And the Details tab here is just some basic information about the property, the listing, and so on. But I want to get to answer your question here, which is inside the Document tab. And this is where the integration from zip forms comes into play. So I don't have a zip form account, but if I did, I could type in my credentials and then have my zip form library, when I click here, actually populate right into DocuSign transaction rooms. That way, all the forms that I'm used to working on in zip forms will be in turn in DocuSign transaction rooms and allow agents and users of the application to type right in their forms right in DocuSign transaction rooms.
And I see there that for brokerages who have adopted the Google platform for mail and calendar and other tools, probably have Google Drive, and you just integrate with that, so the broker doesn't have to put in all of those files again. It's there.
Right, right. So the Google Drive connector creates a bridge between DocuSign transaction rooms and Google Drive. It's a two-way bridge, so both for pulling documents from Google Drive and also pushing documents back into Google Drive. You can do that through this integration as well. There's also probably the most popular way that I see for non-zip form or Google Drive or Dropbox users would be to pull from the computer. And doing that is just as simple as grabbing the documents that you need and opening them up inside of DocuSign transaction rooms.
Yeah, Aaron, I imagine that adding from your computer is the thing that you detest the most, because agents use the old stuff. Whereas if they're pulling from zip forms or pulling from Google Drive, they're always pulling the most contemporary version of the file.
Absolutely, and we highly favor the zip forms integration that we have here in California. Just from a time-saving perspective, many of our purchase agreements can be 30, 40, 50 pages or more, so having the integration by which it pre-populates everywhere that the client needs to sign, date, and otherwise is a huge time saver.
Awesome.
So coming back to the demo real quick, there's a couple things that I didn't show about a specific transaction rooms. I showed briefly how to add some documents into the room. The next piece of the puzzle that I think an agent typically goes through from the groups that I work with is attaching what we call a checklist. And a checklist, as you might presume, is meant to be a guide, a framework for agents to go through their library of checklists that their brokerage has created, identify what sort of listing they're working on. In this case, let's go with the single-family listing. And they attach this checklist to the room. And this, again, this guide shows an agent exactly what's required of them and what's optional within this room in order to complete this checklist. So as agents continue to work and grow this room, they will, when the time is right, attach these documents to the checklist. And this is a part of our approval process that that caters to how our application is compliant. And so that's a big part of what we're doing in ensuring compliance is by using these checklists to guide agents through the process and notify brokers of what's missing and what needs to be fixed and changed within a transaction room. So I can just add these documents to my transaction room checklist. There we are. So once these have been attached to the checklist, this can actually kick-start a process of collaboration between an agent and someone at the brokerage that's responsible for reviewing these checklists. I'm sure, Agent Aaron, you get some of these sent to your inbox as well, these checklists for you to review.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm gonna submit this checklist just so I can show the collaboration, and I'm gonna use Aaron's name since he's in the room just for demo purposes. Okay. Now, I'm going to circle back to this checklist here in a moment, but what I wanted to identify here is the other element of the transaction room, which is inviting people into the room. Now, this room already has 3 people started in the room, and that's because my brokerage has identified a couple different people that they want to automatically have inside the room and thus have the ability to see what's going on. So it's an element of control that a brokerage can put into place so that the right parties are always included in the rooms and thus have the visibility into those rooms. Is that resonating, Victor? Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah, perfect. Yep.
Good. Now, if you needed to ever add someone that you've never worked with before, you just simply send them an email. Type in their first, last name, email, select what role they are within the organization and what side they're working on. And then you just invite them to the room, and that way you can share and collaborate with the documents inside.
I saw another thing there, network. What was that?
Sure. The network is anyone that you've ever worked with historically in the past. So you'll see the network icon here, and if I were to drill down on this network, it's showing me everyone that I've ever worked with. So if you add someone to your transaction room, they're automatically included in your network, and that way you can just pull from your network instead of sending out an email to invite someone new. But let me hop back into the room I was just on, Northwest 45th here. And this envelope tab, again, I mentioned earlier, this is the electronic envelopes that we're sending out for signature. If we wanted to, and this is what I did earlier that we saw in that signing ceremony, is I created an envelope, and I'll just do this real quickly for demo's sake here. We create the name of the envelope, a subject for the envelope, and a message if we want to include one. And we scroll down, work from top to bottom, and we're going to add the documents that we need. Let's grab a document here. And then we're going to choose the recipients that we need to be involved in this signing ceremony and the routing order. So keep in mind this is a 2-step process where we choose who we're going to have sign a document. In this case, let's have it be me. I'm going to choose myself, and I'm going to have myself sign. And maybe I want the owner of the company to just merely receive a copy. So he doesn't need to sign.
Can you set that as a default?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, that's getting into what we call templates. And
okay.
I'd be happy to talk about templates more, but it's essentially creating a workflow that you're already anticipating of what's going to happen, so you don't need to do this process of assigning who's going to assign what and at what time.
Yeah, I recognize that in a lot of organizations where they have a compliance officer or they have a transaction manager, and a lot of brokerages even offer transaction management as a premium service at their firm. Having that person or those people always involved in each envelope is something that's really critical to their business.
Yeah, and I think what the theme of what you're really getting at there is the visibility and making sure that the right parties are seeing the right documents. And that's a big part of what we're doing here as well. Now, what we're looking at here is just what we showed earlier, is that this is the same radon disclosure I used. I'm going to be sending it to a couple people here. Kelly is going to be the one just receiving the copy. But what I'm going to do now is while I'm viewing this document, I have my palette here on this left-hand side. And all I'm doing here, whatever I need to grab, whether it's an initial tag or whatever the case may be, a signature tag, I drag and drop these items exactly where I need them to go.
So in zip forms, are these all pre-programmed?
They are. They are.
So you don't have to do this. It's done.
It's totally done. Right. Exactly. So from a zip form perspective, it's even better for those users that do have zip forms and are accustomed to it, because instead of looking at this view here, they'd be working out of their custom zip form application.
And then for specific broker forms that are not in zip forms, is there a way that the broker can have the form programmed so it operates the same way, so they don't have to have it filled out every time?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. Getting into, again, the templatizing of documents is how we see the most effective people using DocuSign, and I'm sure Aaron and his team probably have a similar experience since they've been such power users for such time.
Are you guys using that, Aaron?
Absolutely, and to just comment on that, on the mortgage side of the business where templatizing is extremely valuable, we deal with 1003 loan applications, documents called IRS 4506Ts, which are requests for the borrower's tax transcripts. So we leverage these templates to be a huge time saver. And one of the great capabilities of the technology is that it does something called intelligent document recognition. So what that means is that it can look at certain parts of the document and use that to identify what the document is and then automatically apply the right tabs to that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Aaron, because that really gets into the the power and the robustness of our tool, is that intelligent document recognition and the ability to pick up on a lot of those templates. What I just did there while we were all speaking is prepare that document and send it out for signature, which took us all of just a couple minutes to accomplish. And this can be even faster if we had some zip form documents in here, or even if we'd created some templates, it would cut out several of those steps. But once the document's sent out for signature, it returns us to our transaction room, 101 Northwest 45th, and we're seeing now we have an envelope out for signature sent earlier today.
So, Matt, can you show, what is the difference between, so everything that we've just seen here is the agent workflow. Is there a view for the broker?
There is.
Managers, within, depending on the size of the brokerage, you may have enterprise, company-wide, you may have regions.
Yep. Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up.
You may have offices, and, so there's different people across the enterprise that, obviously, if you're a company like Howard Hanna doing 20,000 transactions a year, you don't want to see everything that's going on in all those transactions. you want to show people what they really need to see. So if you could give us that understanding, that would be great.
Sure, sure. So that view right there was just the agent view. I'm shifting gears to another tab where I'm actually going to be logged in as a broker or an administrator now. And one of the main differences that we notice when we log in as a broker or administrator or a manager, whomever you might be, there's a couple different views you're looking at. In this case, this is a selling broker where they have their own dashboard, very similar to the agent. But I think what's even more important and more relevant to a broker is this back-end data that we've given you the visibility to customize to your specific specifications. And what I mean by that is this brokerage icon here shows exactly what's happening in the business. And I think what you alluded to, Victor, is if you have multiple offices or even multiple regions like a Howard Hanna, we can actually create a hierarchy by which you can manage your business exactly how it's already arranged. So for a group like Howard Hanna that might work out of a couple regions of the U.S., we could create different regions within the account here, even multiple offices within those regions, so that brokers at various offices can manage their own business, but that also that Howard Hanna Corporate can have access into the visibility of the business in its entirety.
Yeah, I think that, for firms today, what they're really trying to get visibility into is, I mean, obviously the transactions approved is a nice thing, but they usually have that report in other places. It's trying to understand how many deals are going to close today, tomorrow, this week, this month, and where we are on all of those, and then, how can we move those along?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Are you pretty active in doing this, Aaron, in your company? Do you kind of look into it every day to see, where you're at with each closing? And I know you're pretty hands-on as a broker.
I'm pretty hands-on as a broker, but honestly, it provides a valuable tool to give us feedback as to where things are in the process. So definitely, it has a lot of value.
I guess in the old days, you'd be calling agents saying, "Where are we with 234 Main Street in New Orleans?" Right?
And that's always hard to do because we have to recognize that 99% of the time our agents are independent contractors. So it's not where they're employees and they're accountable to us. We have kind of a two-edged sword that we're responsible for supervising them, but they're running their own business at the same time. But it's good to get a high-level view from a revenue management perspective to see what's going on, when things are going to close, so that we can manage our P&L accordingly.
Do your agents find it more valuable to have your mortgage partners inside of these envelopes, where they're helping move the transaction along?
It can be useful, but it's not necessarily helpful to make that happen. They're looking for a very limited subset of documents associated with the actual real estate transaction itself, being typically the purchase contract and its addenda and any title reports that go with that. Other than that, they typically have their own internal systems for tracking all of the borrower income and asset information along with the collateral valuations, etc. In our side of the business, we tend to integrate the real estate and the mortgage business together, so it all appears in the same transaction room for many of our transactions.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yep. Victor, you talked about something earlier that stood out to me in the collaboration from a broker's perspective to see what agents are doing. And one element that I want to show of the tool is from a broker perspective, exactly what we went through earlier from the agent side. And that's when I submitted that checklist for review. I did that purposefully so that we could actually show from the other side of the coin what that looks like. And you'll remember working as an agent on Northwest 45th here earlier. When I log into my brokerage account, the first thing that I do as a broker is go to my review tab, because this is showing me everything that someone on my team has identified that I need to review. And you'll notice this little new icon. This one's never been clicked on. So I see that, I click on it right away, and I get a snapshot of what's been going on from this transaction room activity log. So it looks like David Smith, one of my team members, submitted this to me a couple minutes ago. And when I go into my Documents tab, I can actually see that checklist here. I click on it to expand it, and then I can go through and look at each of these documents, identify if I see any errors or anything going wrong. I can make recommendations on how to improve that document for that agent. So there's an element of collaboration and communication that goes into the tool as well.
How do you do that? How do you send a message to the agent, hey, you're missing the seller's zip code?
Right, that's a good point. What I did here is click on the checklist action. If I approved it, there's no need for a note, but if I reject it, I can write exactly what I need them to fix. And what was it that you said there, Victor?
You're missing the zip code for the seller address.
Right. And so now, when I reject this document, this is actually going back into my agent's view, notifying them exactly what went wrong and how they can fix it. And then I can continue moving forward with the remainder of these documents, reviewing them, approving them, or rejecting them, depending on what I see. And so on and so forth until the process is complete. And then the agent can go back into their transaction room account, whether they're on their smartphone, tablet, or their laptop. It's a tool that enables them to work, again, how they want to work. So if they're not always coming into the office, they can work from home doing this exact same process. The last piece that I really wanted to show is the element of collaboration and of sharing documents. And so what I'm going to do here is, if I were to, let's say, add someone from my network, here we go. If I were to add someone new to my network here, one of the things that I can do, and this goes back to creating a safe and secure environment within a transaction room, is the ability to grant access to documents that I need people to see and revoking access for documents that I definitely don't want them to see. So when you're working with 10, 12 different people on a given transaction, whether it's a client or a home appraiser, you can share the documents with the right people by doing this here. And this allows you to, again, just create more control over exactly who sees what and what they can do within the transaction room. Does that make sense and resonate with everyone?
That's fantastic.
Awesome. Awesome.
So we have about 10 minutes left, and we have some questions here. Is there other stuff that you think we need to look at, or can we move on to a couple questions before we hit the top of the hour?
There's a lot more that we can go over, Victor. I certainly didn't cover everything, so let's open the door for some questions.
Yeah, and Matt, how do people reach you if they need to look at this in more detail?
Would it be? I could provide my email address within the comment section so that everyone can see it. Is that the best way?
Sure, that'd be great. So if any of you want to go over to the GoToWebinar control panel, in the question section, or I'm sorry, in the chat section to the entire audience, you can put your contact information so anybody can get it.
Perfect.
So one person just wanted to get a confirmation that DocuSign is legally binding in New York State.
Yes, it is.
Okay. And then somebody is using an application called Paperless Pipeline for document management, I guess, and they wanted to know how they could integrate DocuSign with that. Maybe I'll just kind of take a crack at that. If you're using Paperless Pipeline, presumably you get to a point where you have a document complete and ready for signature. You can just upload that document to DocuSign and add the signature field, and away you go. That's pretty accurate, Matt?
That's spot on, Victor. And as a matter of fact, I believe Paperless Pipeline took it upon themselves to create a very simple connector to DocuSign where you can work in Paperless Pipeline, which is similar to DocuSign transaction rooms, and then simply push a document to DocuSign, and it opens up the application, and they can tag it for signature. Very simple, but it's designed to be so.
So another person is saying, like, how should they scope out the time required to integrate DocuSign into their business in terms of, like there's a contracting phase, there's a training phase, there's a go-live phase. Can you talk about how you guys like to roll out within a brokerage and what the timeline looks like for that?
Absolutely, absolutely. Most groups that I work with, when we begin a deployment of DocuSign, first of all, the size of the group is a big part of it. If we're talking about hundreds of agents, it's a little bit longer of a deployment cycle than if we're talking about a dozen or 2 dozen different agents. And what we go through is a pretty extensive training session, or sessions, I should say, where we like to grab what we call, a train-the-trainer type of philosophy, where we give you the tools and empower and enable you to be able to do this all on your own. So there's no really development work that needs to be done. You don't need any tech gurus to really set this up. Me, as a not super techie kind of person, could actually arrange an account for a brokerage myself and walk them through everything. That being said, we have specific trainers that will go through with the agents, with the administrators, and with the broker or brokers on various different levels to show exactly what needs to be done to set up this whole account. So long story short, you could be looking at a very short 2-week cycle to have this fully deployed versus maybe closer to a month for some of those larger groups to get it fully up and running.
Aaron, how have you found the support at DocuSign? I mean, presumably you have agents that you're onboarding to the company who are getting used to this right away, and I imagine that you provide some in-house support and questions, but after hours when nobody's around, if an agent gets stuck and they end up calling DocuSign, how are they getting the support that they need? Is that working out pretty well?
Sure. Well, Victor, one of my key criteria for any technology that we introduce to our team is that we're not in the IT business, so we do not want to be providing internal support for anything that we acquire. So it's absolutely imperative that our vendors be able to have a strong service and support organization, which I think that DocuSign excels at. It's easy to get a hold of someone there. If someone has questions, they can walk them through it. But really, it's a pretty intuitive, straightforward process. Now, going back to the adoption aspect of it, well, I like to take the Nike approach. You just do it. You get a couple of your agents on board with it, and they will certainly spread the good word as to the benefits that it has, and then you start to get that organic growth within your organization. So that certainly accelerates the adoption process.
Awesome. Leilani, for the next question, could you pass control back to Matt? The next question is, what if a customer wants to sign on paper? I just want Matt to show again where you, as an agent, you can fax a document into the system. So Matt, you'll need to hit show screen again. So you go to your inbox, and you have a fax number. So if somebody wants to sign on paper, just let them sign it on paper and fax it in. Or you can email it in, looks like, too. So I know that a lot of fancy copy machines that are in brokerages today have the ability to scan a document and email it into the system, so that email address is always there. And that email address is specific to each envelope, right? Matt? You must be muted.
I'm sorry, I was muted. This is a specific email address that we apply for each user of the account as far as the specifics of a transaction room. So this email address is going to remain stagnant, as will this fax number. But for each transaction room, I didn't get into this too much, but happy to do it now, is we have a unique identifier here. One of the reasons that someone might use this number, this 6-digit number, is one, to identify a specific transaction room, but also two, and probably the coolest way that I see people using it today is if you're sending emails back and forth from whomever you're working with, you can actually capture images, pictures, email language inside of a transaction room by sending it to this number here. So if you were to send an email to, in the subject line, pound the 6-digit number, whatever is inside that email address will be populated into the document section here as a PDF.
Oh, wow, that's cool. So just go back to the inbox for a second.
Sure.
Just to be clear, so if somebody faxed a document or emailed a document in, they would appear here, and how would I drop it into a envelope?
Yeah, good question. So what you would do is if you had a document faxed into you or emailed into you from your inbox, you would move that document into a transaction room, whereby there you can sign it, you can share it, whatever you need to do with that document, you can manipulate it within the transaction room tab. The inbox is really just a central area for you to grab everything, and then it's up to the agent to put it where it needs to go.
And how long are the documents stored?
They're stored indefinitely as you're a DocuSign client. So there's never any cost for storing documents on our tool. If you do decide to leave DocuSign for any reason, we will allow you some time to get those documents off of our system. Otherwise, we'll just get rid of them after 90 days.
Okay. And then if an agent leaves the brokerage, not that that would ever happen to Aaron.
No.
What happens to the files? Or how do you handle that, Aaron?
Well, their documents will continue to stay around within the system. Their account becomes deactivated, of course, and we still have access to all of their documents in the system.
And how do they? And so, but they don't have access to it. They need to sort of export those.
They are cut off. So if they want them, they need to export them.
Okay.
And one final piece on that, and it's a good point you bring up, Victor. If an agent does ever leave for any reason, one of the things that we can do is actually transfer the data that this agent was working on, since it's owned by the brokerage, into another agent's name. So if David Smith was working on a handful of transactions, me as the broker can choose, I want Mary, Sally, and Sue to take David's work over and continue to work these deals.
Okay. Excellent. Well, we're right at the top of the hour. We've consumed all of our questions, and I want to thank our panelists very much. Matt, you did an excellent job of showing how DocuSign is being used in real estate today. And Aaron, I really appreciate the commentary that you provided about how it's benefited your business. I think that as brokers look at many of these applications today, there's certainly a plethora of opportunities to buy one thing or another, but it's always helpful to understand from a user's perspective how credible it is that the technology is delivering on the promise. So if we could just get everyone on the phone to tell us if you enjoyed today's webinar. We always appreciate feedback. It's our version of the Realtor Ratings. That really helps us, and by all means, drop us a note if you think there's some things that we could do to improve today's webinar. And last, I would just ask that you be aware that we're going to send you an email with the recording of today's webinar, and you'll be able to circulate that in your office or amongst your colleagues as necessary if they're participating in the decision to use these types of tools in your business. And so with that, I'd like to remind the panelists, please do not close your GoToWebinar. It will destroy the recording of today's webinar. And thank everyone again for attending. And we'll talk to you again soon on the next RETechinar. So thanks, everyone. I'm really grateful for all of your help.
Thank you.